The restaurant was silent the moment the boss walked in. Every waiter straightened, every customer lowered their eyes. This was his territory and everyone knew it. But then the doors burst open so violently the glass rattled. A little girl, maybe 6, sprinted inside, tears streaked down her cheeks, breath shaking, hair tangled. Like she'd run miles. She didn't stop at the counter. She didn't look for help. She ran straight to the Mafia boss. Before the guards could even raise their guns, she grabbed onto his coat with both hands and sobbed, "He is coming, please, he is coming." The entire restaurant froze. The boss knelt down. Slowly, his voice low and steady. "Who?" he asked. "Who is coming for you?" The girl's lips trembled. She whispered one name, a name that made 2 of his guards swear under their breath, a name the boss hadn't heard in years, one that should have stayed buried. In an instant, the Mafia boss stood up, chair crashing behind him, eyes burning with fury. No hesitation, no questions, no negotiations. He stormed out of the restaurant with his entire crew behind him. Whatever that little girl said, it wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration of war. Stay with me until the end, because the truth behind that name, she whispered, changed the Mafia boss' entire life in a single moment. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let us get started. The name that escaped her lips was Vincent Torino. To understand why this name carried such weight, you need to know the history between these 2 men. Marco Salvatore wasn't born a Mafia boss. 20 years ago, he was just another street kid trying to survive in the wrong neighborhood. But Vincent was already a legend by then. Vincent ran the biggest human trafficking ring on the East Coast. Children disappeared from playgrounds. Teenagers vanished from bus stops. Families were torn apart in the middle of the night. The police couldn't touch him. Too many officials on his payroll. Too many connections protecting him from above. But Marco had a personal reason to hate Vincent Torino. His little sister Sophia had been walking home from school one October afternoon when she was 13. She never made it. The police found her backpack 3 blocks away. Contents scattered across the pavement like broken promises. They searched for weeks. Marco searched for months. Vincent Torino's name kept surfacing in whispered conversations and rumors that died before they could grow into evidence. But Marco knew deep in his bones, he knew who had taken Sophia. That knowledge transformed him from a desperate brother into something else entirely, something dangerous. Marco spent 5 years building his own network, not for money or territory or respect. He built it for one purpose: to find Vincent Torino and make him pay. Every connection he made, every favor he earned, every dollar he collected was a step closer to the man who had destroyed his family. When Marco finally found Vincent's operation, it wasn't what he expected. The trafficking ring was bigger than anyone had imagined. Hundreds of children moved like cargo across state lines, safe houses disguised as legitimate businesses, a network that stretched from New York to Miami. Marco didn't go to the police. He couldn't trust them. Instead, he went to war. The raid on Vincent's main compound happened on a Tuesday night in December. Marco brought 30 men armed with everything they could carry. They moved through Vincent's defenses like shadows, dismantling the security systems, neutralizing the guards, cutting off every escape route. But when they reached the center of the operation, Vincent wasn't there. What they found instead changed everything. 43 children locked in rooms no bigger than closets. Kids who hadn't seen sunlight in months, who flinched when adults spoke to them, who had given up hope of ever going home. Among them, Marco found his sister, Sophia, alive but broken in ways that would take years to heal. Vincent Torino had vanished like smoke, leaving behind only his victims and the wreckage of his empire. Marco made sure every child got home safely. He personally drove Sophia to the hospital, held her hand through every interview with the authorities, sat beside her bed every night until she could sleep without nightmares. The media called him a hero. The FBI wanted to question him about his methods, but Marco only cared about one thing. Vincent Torino was still out there. The authorities closed the case after 6 months. No leads, no witnesses willing to testify, no evidence that could hold up in court. Vincent had disappeared completely, taking his secrets with him. Marco never stopped looking, even as his legitimate businesses grew, even as he built a new life around protecting his community. He kept searching. Every informant, every contact, every whispered rumor was filtered through one question: where is Vincent Torino? Years passed. Marco became known for different reasons. He opened community centers in rough neighborhoods. He funded scholarships for kids who needed a second chance. He made sure families had food on their tables and roofs over their heads. The media started calling him a reformed criminal, a success story about redemption. But the people who worked closest to Marco knew better. They saw how his jaw tightened whenever someone mentioned missing children. They noticed how he personally handled every case involving kids in danger. They understood that Marco Salvatore's transformation wasn't about forgiveness or moving on. It was about making sure no other family suffered what his had suffered. The restaurant where this story began was more than just a business. It was Marco's headquarters, his safe haven, the place where people came when they needed help and had nowhere else to turn. Parents brought him photos of missing teenagers. Wives showed up with bruises they couldn't explain to police. Kids ran to him when the adults in their lives had failed them. Marco had built something powerful over the years, not a criminal empire, but a network of protection. People trusted him because he delivered results. When the system failed, he found the missing, stopped the predators, and made the monsters disappear. So when a 6-year-old girl burst through his doors, tears streaming down her face, begging for help from a man she'd never met before, Marco knew exactly what kind of danger she was running from. And when she whispered Vincent Torino's name, every protective instinct Marco had developed over 2 decades of searching exploded into action. Because Vincent Torino wasn't supposed to exist anymore. He was supposed to be dead in prison, or at least broken beyond repair. The fact that this child knew his name meant only one thing: Vincent was back and he was hunting again. Marco's reaction wasn't just anger. It was recognition. The little girl clinging to his coat could have been Sophia 20 years ago. Could have been any of the 43 children he'd rescued from Vincent's compound. Could have been the next victim in a pattern that should have ended decades ago, but it didn't end. And now Vincent Torino had made a critical mistake. He had chosen to operate in Marco Salvatore's territory. The moments after Marco stormed out of that restaurant moved like clockwork. His men didn't need orders. They'd seen that look in his eyes only once before, and they knew what it meant. Tony grabbed the surveillance equipment from the back office. Louis started making calls to every contact they had on the streets. Big Mike locked down the restaurant, sending customers home with apologetic smiles and promises of free meals tomorrow. But Marco wasn't thinking about protocols or procedures. He was thinking about the little girl's eyes, the way she looked at him like he was her last hope in the world, the way her small hands had gripped his coat with desperate strength. Those eyes reminded him of Sophia as the night he found her in Vincent's compound, hollow, haunted, but still fighting, still believing someone would save her. The girl was still there when Mara returned 20 minutes later, now sitting in a corner booth with Maria, the restaurant's head waitress. Maria had brought her hot chocolate and a sandwich, speaking in soft tones that had finally stopped the child's tears. Marco approached slowly, his earlier fury replaced by careful control. He slid into the booth across from them, his voice gentle but urgent. "What is your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," she whispered, not looking up from her cup. "Emma Rodriguez." "Emma, that is a beautiful name. Can you tell me where you live, where your parents are?" The question made her shoulders shake again. "Mama is at work. The night shift at the hospital. Papa has been gone since I was little. Who is supposed to be watching you?" Emma's grip tightened on the mug. "Mrs. Patterson from next door," but she fell asleep watching TV again. That is, when I saw him. Marco felt his jaw clench. "Saw who?" "Emma. The man from that park, the one who has been watching me walk to school. He was at my window tonight trying to get in." Every muscle in Marco's body went rigid. Vincent's pattern had changed. Still targeting vulnerable children. Still hunting when guardians weren't paying attention. Still using the same predatory tactics that had destroyed so many families. "Emma, this man at your window, did he say anything to you?" She nodded, tears starting fresh. "He said his name was Vincent. He said he had candy in his car. He said he wanted to be my friend." The words hit Marco like physical blows. Vincent was using his real name now, confident enough or arrogant enough to abandon the aliases he'd hidden behind for years. That meant he felt safe, untouchable, protected. That was his second mistake. "Emma, you did exactly the right thing running here. You're safe now, but I need you to tell me everything you remember about this man." Over the next hour, Emma's story unfolded in fragments. The man had appeared in her neighborhood 3 weeks ago, always seeming to be wherever she was, at the playground, after school, outside the corner store where she bought milk from Mrs. Patterson, walking past her apartment building at odd hours. She told Mrs. Patterson, who dismissed her concerns as an overactive imagination. She mentioned it to her teacher, who made a note, but hadn't followed up. She even tried calling her mother at the hospital, but the nurses said she was too busy to talk. Emma had been alone with her fear, watching a predator circle closer each day until tonight when Vincent finally made his move. "Why did you come here, Emma?" "Why my restaurant?" Emma looked up at him for the first time since she started talking. "My friend Carlos at school, his big brother works for you. He said you help kids when nobody else. Well, he said you make the bad men go away." Marco felt something break open in his chest. Word had spread through the neighborhood as children that he was safe, that he could be trusted, that he would fight for them when adults failed them. These kids had created their own network of protection, passing information through playground whispers and hallway conversations. Emma had run 6 blocks in the dark, barefoot and terrified, because children trusted him to keep them safe. The weight of that responsibility settled over Marco like armor. Emma, I am going to make you a promise that man will never hurt you or any other child. Do you understand me? She nodded, something like hope flickering in her eyes. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe while I handle this. Maria is going to take you to my sister Sophia. She lives nearby and she lines take good care of you until your mama gets home from work. Marco turned to Maria. Call Sophia. Tell her. It is code 7. Maria's face went pale. Code 7 meant a child was in immediate danger from a predator. Sophia would understand instantly, would prepare her apartment like a fortress, would stay armed and alert until the threat was eliminated. Sophia had never fully recovered from what Vincent had done to her, but she de-channeled her trauma into fierce protectiveness. She ran a safe house network for endangered children, funded by Marco's businesses, staffed by people who understood that some monsters wore human faces. As Maria made the call, Marco studied Emma's face, memorizing every detail. This child had trusted him with her life, had run to him when the entire adult world had failed her. He would not let Vincent Torino claim another victim. Not on his watch. Not ever again. Tony, Marco called out. His lieutenant appeared instantly. I want every camera in a 6-block radius around Emma's neighborhood checked. Every traffic cam, every security system, every doorbell camera. Find me Vincent's vehicle, his route, his patterns. Already on it. Boss, Louise has teams canvassing the area now. Good. What about our police contacts? Detective Morrison is working tonight. She is clean and she hates child predators almost as much as you do. Marco nodded. Detective Morrison had worked with them before on cases involving missing kids. She understood that sometimes justice moved faster through unofficial channels than through courtrooms clogged with bureaucracy and technicalities. Set up a meeting, 1 hour, the usual place, as his team dispersed to execute their assignments. Marco felt the familiar transformation taking hold. The businessman facade melted away, replaced by something colder, more focused, infinitely more dangerous. Vincent Torino had spent 20 years believing he'd escaped justice, 20 years thinking he was untouchable, that his crimes had been forgotten, that his victims didn't matter. Tonight he would learn how wrong he'd been, because Marco Salvatore had spent those same 20 years building something Vincent had never understood. Not just power or wealth or influence, but a community that protected its own, a network that watched over the vulnerable, that listened to children when adults ignored them, that stepped up when the system failed. Emma Rodriguez had run to him because she'd heard he was someone who made the bad men disappear. She was about to find out exactly how right she'd been. The meeting with Detective Morrison took place in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the industrial district. Marco arrived first, his headlights cutting through the darkness as he pulled between rusted shipping containers. The detective's unmarked sedan appeared moments later, followed by Tony's vehicle carrying surveillance equipment. Morrison stepped out her weathered face grim in the yellow glow of the street lights. She'd been working child predator cases for 15 years, and the toll showed in the lines around her eyes, the set of her shoulders, the way her hand never strayed far from her weapon. Marco, her greeting was professional but warm. They developed an understanding over the years, a mutual respect built on shared purpose rather than official protocol. Detective, thank you for coming. She studied his expression, reading the controlled fury he kept carefully contained. This is about Vincent Torino, isn't it? Your guy Tony filled me in on the basics, but I need to hear it from you. Marco handed her a file Tony had compiled during the drive over. Photos of Emma, transcripts of her statement, surveillance footage from around her neighborhood showing a figure watching the apartment building at various times. Over the past 3 weeks, Morrison flipped through the pages, her jaw tightening with each new detail. Son of, hey, I thought he was dead. So did I. Apparently, we were both wrong. The girl's story checks out. We've had 3 other reports in the past month about men matching Vincent's description, hanging around elementary schools in the area, different districts, different jurisdictions. So nobody connected the dots. Marco felt his hands clench into fists. Vincent was hunting systematically, testing multiple hunting grounds, looking for the perfect victim. Emma had just been the first child vulnerable enough and isolated enough to make his move on. What is the official response going to be? Morrison closed the file, her expression hardening. By the book, we issue a bolo alert. Increase patrols around the schools, maybe. Set up a task force if we can prove pattern behavior. Could take weeks to get proper authorization, assuming we can even locate him. And unofficially, she met his eyes directly. Vincent Torino destroys 17 families that we know before he disappeared. 17 children who never came home. The statute of limitations has run out on most of his crimes, and the few cases we could still prosecute would take years to work through the system. That is not an answer, Detective. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, weighing her words carefully. Unofficially, if Vincent Torino were to disappear permanently, I wouldn't lose any sleep, but I can be involved in making that happen. Marco nodded. He expected that response. Morrison was a good cop, but she was still a cop. She had rules to follow, procedures to respect, superiors to answer to. Marco had no such constraints. I need 48 hours before you file any official reports. Marco, 48 hours. Sarah, that little girl, trusted me to keep her safe. I gave her my word. Morrison stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. The paperwork for Emma's statement got lost somewhere between my car and the station. Might take me a few days to recreate it from memory. Thank you. She started toward her car, then paused. Marco, whatever you're planning, be smart about it. Vincent is not the same man he was 20 years ago. He has had time to get paranoid, to build new connections, to learn from his mistakes. So have I. The drive back to the restaurant took them through Emma's neighborhood. Marco had Tony pull over 3 blocks from her apartment building, wanting to see the hunting ground through Vincent's eyes. The area was perfect for a predator. Poorly lit streets, apartment buildings with broken security systems, working-class families where parents pulled double shifts and children were often left with elderly neighbors or teenage babysitters, multiple escape routes through alleyways, and construction sites close enough to 3 different school districts to provide a steady stream of potential victims. Vincent had chosen his territory well. "Boss, we got movement." Tony's voice was tense as he pointed down the street. Black sedan been circling the block for the past 10 minutes. Drivers alone, male, approximately the right age. Marco felt his pulse spike. "Get closer, but stay back far enough that he doesn't make us." They followed the sedan through a maze of residential streets, watching as it slowed near playgrounds and bus stops as the driver studied apartment complexes and noted which units had lights on late at night. This was reconnaissance behavior, the systematic mapping of hunting territory that Marco recognized from his own surveillance work. The sedan finally pulled into the parking lot of a rundown motel on the edge of town, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions about identification or payment methods. "Room 237, Tony noted as they watched the figure climb the exterior staircase. "Want me to call it into Morrison?" "Not yet. First, we confirm it as really him." Marco's phone buzzed with a text from Louise that surveillance footage from Emma's neighborhood had yielded results. Clear images of the same black sedan parked across from her school at dismissal time for the past week. License plate registered to a rental company under a false name, but the credit card used traced back to a shell company that had been dormant for 19 years. Vincent Torino's shell company. The confirmation sent a cold rage through Marco's system. Vincent hadn't just returned to his old hunting grounds. He'd returned to his old methods, his old patterns, his old arrogant belief that he was untouchable. "Tony, I want full surveillance on that motel room round-the-clock shifts, but keep it invisible." Louise handles electronic monitoring. Big Mike coordinates the perimeter. Nobody moves without my direct order. "What about the girl, Emma?" "She stays with Sophia until this is finished. Full protection detail, but discreet. I don't want Vincent knowing we on to him until I am ready." The next 24 hours unfolded like a chess match between the masters who'd been studying each other's moves for decades. Vincent maintained his routine, leaving the motel each morning to scout new territory, returning each evening to plan his next move. He visited for different elementary schools, to playgrounds and a community center where after-school programs kept children busy. Parents worked late shifts. Marco's team tracked every movement, documented every location, built a comprehensive picture of Vincent's current operation. What they discovered was worse than I expected. Vincent wasn't working alone this time. The surveillance footage revealed 3 additional men, younger but following the same predatory patterns. They worked in coordination, one man scouting, while another provided lookout duties, the third maintaining communications and transportation. It was a professional operation, systematic and efficient. They upgraded their methods since the old days. Encrypted phones, rental vehicles rotated every few days, false identities backed by sophisticated documentation. Vincent had learned from his previous mistakes, adapted his approach, built a network that could operate across multiple jurisdictions without triggering law enforcement attention. But he made one critical error in calculation. He assumed Marco Salvatore was still the desperate street kid who spent 5 years building a crude revenge fantasy. Vincent had no idea what Marco had become in the intervening decades, how deep his connections ran, how sophisticated his own network had grown. The warehouse where they found Vincent's original operation had been child's play compared to what Marco could bring to bear now. He had legitimate businesses that provided perfect cover for surveillance operations. He had technology that could crack encrypted communications and track digital footprints across multiple platforms. Most importantly, he had people who understood that protecting children wasn't just a job or a cause, it was a sacred duty. Sophia called Marco on the second evening, her voice carefully controlled, but carrying an undercurrent of steel that reminded him why Vincent had never fully broken her spirit. Emma has been asking questions about the man who was watching her. She is smart, Marco, smarter than we gave her credit for. She wants to help, absolutely not. Listen to me before you say no. She remembers details we haven't asked her about yet. The way he walked, specific things he said, behaviors that might help us predict his next move. Marco felt torn between his protective instincts and the tactical advantage Emma's information might provide. It is too dangerous to involve her further. She is already involved. The question is whether we use her knowledge to end this quickly or leave her wondering if the monster is still out there hunting other children. The conversation continued for 20 minutes, Sophia presenting arguments, while Marco wrestled with the decision. Finally, they reached a compromise. Emma would provide additional details through Sophia, but she would remain in protective custody until Vincent was neutralized. The information Emma provided changed everything. Vincent had told her he was new to the area, that he was looking for special children to be part of his family. He mentioned having a big house where children could play all day without going to school. Most chilling of all, he asked specific questions about her schedule, her mother's work hours, and whether she had any siblings or close friends who might notice if she disappeared. This wasn't the opportunistic predation. Vincent was building detailed profiles of potential victims, selecting children who could disappear without immediate detection. The systematic nature of his approach suggested he was planning multiple abductions, possibly intending to establish a new trafficking operation. The scope of the threat multiplied Marco's sense of urgency. Emma had been the first target, but she wouldn't be the last. Every day Vincent remained operational was another day he could destroy another family. Marco made his decision. Tony assembled the full team, everyone who worked the original raid 20 years ago, plus our current specialists. I want them at the warehouse by midnight. Full tactical deployment. No, this isn't a raid, this is an execution. The warehouse had been converted into Marco's primary operations center years earlier. What looked like abandoned industrial space from the outside concealed sophisticated communications equipment, weapons, storage, and planning facilities that rivaled anything law enforcement agencies possessed. 12 men gathered around the central table as Marco laid out surveillance photos, building schematics, and operational timelines. These weren't common criminals or street thugs. They were specialists, each chosen for specific skills developed over years of working cases that fell outside normal legal channels. Luis handled electronic surveillance and communications. His background in Military intelligence made him invaluable for tracking targets across multiple platforms while maintaining operational security. Big Mike provided tactical coordination and heavy weapons support. 25 years as a Marine had taught him how to plan complex operations and adapt when situations went sideways. Tony served as Marco's lieutenant and strategic planner. His combination of street smarts and business acumen made him perfect for coordinating between Marco's legitimate operations and his shadow activities. The other 9 men represented specialties ranging from long-range surveillance to forensic cleanup, from computer intrusion to psychological operations. Each had personal reasons for joining Marco's crusade against predators, and each had proven their reliability through years of successful operations. Gentlemen, Vincent Torino is back in business. Current intelligence suggests he is planning multiple abductions within the next week. We have one chance to end this permanently. Marco activated a wall-mounted display showing real-time surveillance footage from the motel. Vincent's room was dark, but thermal imaging showed for heat signatures inside, confirming the presence of his entire team. The target has upgraded his operations since we last encountered him. Professional equipment, sophisticated planning, multiple escape routes prepared. We cannot afford to underestimate him or allow any member of his team to escape. The plan Marco outlined was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its thoroughness. Vincent's team would be eliminated simultaneously at multiple locations, preventing any possibility of warning or escape. Their vehicles, equipment, and documentation would be secured for analysis. Their communications would be monitored and recorded to identify any additional network connections. Most importantly, Vincent himself would be taken alive. Marco had questions that needed answers before Vincent died. Questions about other operations, other victims, other predators who might still be active, information that could save children who were currently in danger. But didn't he yet know it? Timeline is 18 hours from now. Vincent's pattern indicates he lines be moving to a new location tomorrow night. We intercept him during the transition when his team is most vulnerable. The meeting continued past 3 o'clock in the morning. Every detail planned and rehearsed, every contingency considered and prepared for. When the team finally dispersed, Marco remained behind, staring at surveillance footage of Vincent moving around his motel room. 20 years of searching, 20 years of wondering if justice would ever be served, 20 years of living with the knowledge that a monster walked free while his victims suffered in silence. Tomorrow night, that chapter would finally close, but as Marco watched Vincent's silhouette through the thermal camera, he realized something had changed within himself. The young man who originally sought revenge had been motivated by personal pain and righteous anger. The person planning Vincent's capture now was driven by something colder and more purposeful. Marco Salvatore had become exactly what his community needed him to be, a guardian who stood between innocent children and the monsters who hunted them, a protector who operated outside the law. When the law failed to protect the vulnerable, a force that predators learned to fear when they thought themselves untouchable. Vincent Torino had spent 20 years believing he'd escape justice. Tomorrow, he would discover that justice had simply been taking its time. The operation began at dusk when the city's shadows grew long enough to hide 12 men moving through abandoned industrial corridors. Marco's team had rehearsed this moment countless times, but the night carried weight that practice sessions could never replicate. Vincent's motel sat like a festering wound against the darkening sky. Room 237 glowed with artificial light, thermal imaging confirming for targets inside, weapons visible through electronic surveillance, escape routes mapped and monitored. Marco positioned himself across the parking lot, watching through high-powered optics as Vincent moved between the window and a table covered with photographs, children's faces, school schedules, home addresses, written in careful handwriting that made Marco's blood run cold. Emma's photos sat prominently in the center, circled in red marker with notes about her mother's work schedule, her elderly babysitter's habits, the exact time she walked home from school each day. But Emma wasn't the only child being hunted. 12 other photographs surrounded hers. 12 other families who had no idea their children were being stalked by a predator who spent decades perfecting his craft. Kids who played in parks where Vincent had tested security cameras, who attended schools where his associates had posed as maintenance workers, who lived in apartments where fake utility inspectors had mapped interior layouts. The scope of Vincent's current operation dwarfed anything he'd attempted 20 years earlier. This wasn't opportunistic hunting. This was industrial-scale predation planned with corporate efficiency and executed with military precision. Marco keyed his radio voice steady despite the fury building in his chest. All units report status. Luis in position. Electronic countermeasures active. Target communications jammed. Big Mike covering rear exit. No movement detected. Tony at primary entrance. Vehicle barriers deployed. The raid lasted exactly 7 minutes. When the smoke cleared, Vincent Torino's 20-year reign of terror was finally over. His network dismantled, his associates captured, and 13 children saved from a fate worse than death. Emma Rodriguez returned to her mother that night, but she was different, stronger. She learned that sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge from the darkest places, that courage comes in all forms, and that one brave child speaking up can change everything. Marco kept his promise. Vincent never hurt another child, but more than that, Emma's courage had reminded him why he fought, not for revenge anymore, but for protection, for justice, for the belief that every child deserves someone willing to stand between them and the monsters of this world. 6 months later, Marco received a hand-drawn card from Emma.